And I think it's official. I think we're live. Here we go. Let's do this thing. The Help a Teacher Facebook Live every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central. I love it. And let me do a little public service announcement for myself because I can't. I've got probably 4 messages already since the last Facebook Live that we did that people were wanting to know. Like I'm always leaning in and leaning out. They're saying, man, and even Christine said, just put your readers on. And the thing is, like, I'm at that age where like I need like 4 pairs of glasses for every distance. Like if I have to take them off so I can sort of see, and then I have to put other glasses on to see far away. So like I'd be changing glasses 3 and 4 times this whole show. See, look at me, I'm already leaning to see where we are. All right, let's get this thing started. First of all, before we get going, let me do a shout out. Our book study right now is with Todd Neslony, and I spoke at his Celebrate Your Story conference that was just happening there in Branham, Texas over the weekend. It was on Friday and Saturday, and it was amazing. There were speakers from all over, and our guest tonight is the whole Behavior Flip was a sponsor. They gave away books, they gave away a subscription. It was amazing conference. And that's the thing, anytime you put that many educators in one place that love kids, love their job, passionate about the work that we do, amazing things are going to happen. And also tonight, here's what I love, we have gift cards. Look, this Craig Newmark Philanthropies, this dude is amazing. I'm gonna just say he loves teachers, he supports teachers, and he loves what's going on with Help a Teacher. And again, through the Craig Newmark Philanthropies, we're giving away 3 gift cards tonight. You can have your pick: a Target gift card, an Amazon gift card, and they're $100 each. I know, it's crazy. Every time I read that, I'm like, what? Yeah. So all you have to do to qualify is comment. Leave a comment, maybe tell us where you're tuning in from, and then what we do is we put all those names into the name randomizer, and somehow through the magic of the internet, it's going to spit out 3 names, and then we will announce those names at some point here tonight. And then your job is to message the Help a Teacher folks through Messenger, and let them know that you're how to get the gift card to you, and we'll make it happen. All right. So, hey, speaking of book studies, the next one coming up is the Hacking School Discipline. And this one, if you register tonight, the next couple of days, I think you might have 24 hours or something like that. Registration opens, and I think they're going to give away 10 books. But get registered, and the thing starts on February 6th. And if you are on Help a Teacher Twitter, Help a Teacher Facebook page, all the details are scrolling through there. Seems like on a daily basis. All right, now here is, let's get into this thing. We are going to bring in our guest tonight. And man, this guy, Brad, listen, every time I read these intros and like these bios, I feel like I haven't accomplished enough in my life, is what it makes me think. It makes me think I got to step up my game. All right, so we have the Chief Innovation Officer over at Behavior Flip, and that's like one of those apps, and there's all this technology, and every time I come across this thing, people are cheering it and championing this thing, and so we're going to find out all the details tonight. In that, he's through the education world. He's taught for 11 years. He was a principal for a couple of years on the east side of Indianapolis. He was director of curriculum and instruction. He's the creator of Teacher Goals, and I've seen their stuff all over social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and also the website. So Brad, man, come on in, join us tonight. Let me see if I can get you on the screen. I'm doing the best I can. I'm going fast. Here we go. And we have Brad in 5, 4, 3 somewhere. And hey, man, real quick, tell me, explain to me, how do I pronounce your last name?
It's Weinstein. So
I knew it.
It's Einstein with a W in front of it.
All right,
yeah, and I taught science, and the show Little Einsteins, my kids actually thought was about our last name. Little, they call it Little Weinsteins. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah, man, I saw I started thinking, I started the show and I got to the intro and went, oh my gosh, it could go either way on this one. It could go Weinstein. And I thought, just like I do with the kids, like when I'm calling roll on the first day, I say the first name. I say, brother, teach me how to pronounce your last name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got it. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's been mispronounced my whole entire life. So I answer to whatever. I've been called a lot worse.
It's I bet teaching for 11 years. I bet you have.
Hmm.
All right, hey man. So take me back. Like when you started this whole teaching thing. Like we have a lot to get to, and I mean, now that you're on the road, you guys are in Tennessee. Where in Tennessee are you guys tonight?
We're in Lauderdale, Tennessee. We're working with some schools on restorative practices and implementation around that and around our book. So we travel all over the place, working with schools and corporations on how to implement all those kinds of things with discipline.
Yeah, all right, here we go. Let's get into this thing because teaching downtown in Indianapolis on the east side, you guys, you had to figure something out when it comes to discipline and classroom leadership and all that. So if we could go back when you first started this whole teaching thing and you walk into the classroom and you're standing before the kids right there, your first day, first week, like how do you were you totally prepared and ready to go, or was it a little bit of a shock for you?
Absolutely, I was from the very first day. Man, everything was great. No,
That was awesome. Day one.
not at all. I really feel like I didn't know what I was doing. Like when you go through college, it's just theory, and you're making all these lesson plans that are like 24 pages long, and the perfect this and the perfect that. And when I got into student teaching, that's when I realized, holy cow, this is not at all what I've been prepared for. So that was eye opener to me, student teaching. And even then, I had support from a mentor teacher, and I had some lessons and things like that. But when I got in there in the first week of school, man, that's when I really understood. It's not just the kids, it's not just the lessons, but it's also the parents, the community, and everyone involved that I need to be accountable for. So yeah, it was really rough at first. But
Man, when you showed up and you're doing the student teaching thing, because it could go either way. Sometimes a student teacher lands with a mentor who truly is passionate about taking that teacher and molding them into a world-class educator. And sometimes you just get, a kid gets stuck with the oldest teacher in the school and things don't go well. Did you have a pretty good experience?
I had a pretty good experience where I student taught. I thought, I came in with the new age, the newer ideas, and all this technology and things like that. And I worked with more of an old school kind of teacher that knew the ropes. So I was actually a little bit humbled and realized, that all of these crazy new innovative ideas were great, but sometimes you just need to use pencil, paper, scissors, and basic things in conversations with kids over the flashy stuff. So I thought it was a very humbling experience. And I learned a lot about teaching in that way.
Yeah. I always say, there's a few schools that have, they really, what they've done is they've ruined me in that. I mean, I have seen schools, on the Texas-Mexico border, in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky, in, downtown Detroit, where, they really, I mean, these teachers with what they have, they are incredible. I mean, just phenomenal. And so anytime I see some teacher complaining about their collaborative learning, Bluetooth, iPad cart won't connect, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like I've seen people with a chalkboard and a yardstick, man, and they are world-class educators.
Yeah, technology is great, and it can do a whole lot of things for you, and it can connect you outside of your classroom. But the reality is, we will never be replaced by technology. Technology can't replace a handshake, a high five, a hug, a good old fashioned conversation or relationship with an adult and talking to each other in person. So I love technology. It can do a lot for you, but man, it's just one of those things where it's just not the end all be all. I don't think that technology will ever replace completely the human side of teaching.
Yeah, I was recently invited to an office where they were looking at a new app for teachers and educators, and they kept showing all the bells and whistles, and it was really fancy and it was awesome. And they asked me what I thought, and I said, well, I think it's terrible. If the teacher's terrible, and I think this is absolutely amazing if the teacher's amazing. Show me the teacher and I'll show you how well this whole thing's going to work.
Oh yeah, technology is not going to make a bad teacher good. It's definitely not going to make an ineffective teacher effective or anything like that. It's one of those things that can make something that's really good amazing, or it's something that can actually make something really good worse. So it really depends. It's a tool. It's like a fancier pencil, really. So basically, when you use technology, it's something that you have to be very careful with, that you're not replacing basic human connections. You're not replacing basic things you can do in the classroom. But it's cool because I can collaborate with other people across the world. I can move at my own pace in my learning. I don't have to wait for the teacher to teach me that. I can go and learn that on my own. So you have all this access to information that you don't need the teacher to give you, and all those great things. But the reality is that there's a whole lot of benefit to collaborative learning and learning from a person in the moment and having those conversations.
Yeah, I believe it. And when you showed up in the class, you were teaching science?
I actually attempted elementary education for 2 years. So when I student taught in first grade. So I was a 21-year-old guy going into a first grade classroom with no kids myself.
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was what I wanted to do, but it just wasn't my jam. So then I taught fourth grade for a couple of years. It went a little bit better, and I liked it, but they just didn't understand my sense of humor. So, I have a very dry sense of humor, and I'd say something that was pretty funny or make a reference to something pretty funny, and they just give me blank stares. I mean, they had no clue I was joking or I wasn't joking. They didn't get any of my references, when I referenced like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys or Britney Spears or any kind of pop culture reference. They had no clue what I was talking about.
Right.
So, when I went to the middle school level and I taught middle school science. So, and I always like to say this to everyone, that's why I look a lot older than I am, because I taught middle school for a decade. It really, I believe it ages you like dog years. Being at the middle school level is something that, but those kids, they at least humored me by laughing. I mean, when I would say something funny, they'd at least smirk or pretend it was funny. So that's where I stuck around for a long time.
Yeah, if nothing else, they're laughing at you, which is fine for me. I don't care. Just so we're laughing. It could be with me, at me, whatever you guys want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had that same experience. I kicked it off, and I taught in a tiny town, and I taught K through 12. And in those little bitty towns, you teach all kinds of stuff to everybody. And I remember that first day, and my job, one of my first jobs was take first grade down to the gymnasium. Oh. And by myself, and no one taught, I'm 21, man. I don't know. So I said, all right, let's go to the gymnasium. And I left with about 20 of them. I think I got there with maybe 4. And so apparently you're supposed to take inventory of your kids and make sure that no one told me that part. So I just did the best I could. Yeah, man. After you get, so when you did how many years in junior high?
About a decade in junior high.
So 70 years in dog years.
It was about 70 years in dog years. Yeah.
I got it.
I loved it, but it's one of those things. You have to be a pretty unique person to like it, because a lot of people go into education because I want to help younger kids, and they go into elementary education because they love the younger kids. Yeah. And a lot of people go, some people go into a subject because they love the subject, like English, math, science, things like that. So they think they're going to go teach high school. There's very few people that think I want to be a middle school teacher when they're 18 years old or 19 years old going into college. It kind of just happens.
Yeah, man. You know what James says? James says, so true, man. The theory versus reality is crazy. And it's so true. Like I always say that I'm not sure that anything that's ever happened in theory has actually happened in my classroom.
No, the theory versus reality is just nuts, because we learn all of these things. And like the famous Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right?
Right.
So, it's one of those things where the reality is that you can't actually do 87 different things in one lesson and do a great job of them all and be, I look at it like this. If you think about in the NBA or playing basketball, it's like we're expecting teachers to be point guards, power forwards, small forwards, and centers. We're expecting them to play all the positions and be great at every single position. And I think that's just not reality. I mean, you can't do that many things in one game if you're a basketball player. Just like in a lesson, you can't do 87 different things in one lesson.
And then to top it off, and you put that same responsibility on a first-year teacher, and that's when we have real problems.
Oh yeah, and in a lot of places, what I think would be useful is more of an apprenticeship kind of role for a teacher, where they get hired, they get to actually spend time, and they get to actually work or co-teach with somebody else for a long period of time. Just that semester you get student teaching, you don't get the full experience. You're coming in, you're getting some responsibilities, you get a gradual release. It's just not the same. But for teachers, we're just hey, go and do this on your own full time. You're gonna have to deal with the parents. the kids, the principal, and all these external factors. You're going to have all these lesson plans. You have to do all of this grading. And it's like, man, I would spend a good 3 or 4 hours, if not the entire night, every night planning. And they wonder why teachers burn out, and they wonder why so many people leave in the first 5 years of the profession.
Yeah. It's true, man. And, in fact, I talked about this last week with CJ Reynolds. I remember, Real Rap with Reynolds. And, we talked about the same thing, man. And that really is, I think that's a huge undertaking. That's going to take years for a district or a school system to shift into more of an apprenticeship program. But what they can do right now is stop that nonsense with one mentor for a teacher and give them a few people that can handle a few different, like give them an emotional support person and give them the content person and give them a classroom leadership person, and then give them a parent person, give them 4 or 5 people that can help them with little bits and parts of this crazy career. Is just so much for a kid to handle coming straight out of college.
Yeah, and emotional supports are something we don't really provide, in my opinion, to many teachers at all.
No,
because we look at whole child teaching, right? Like we need to meet their social emotional needs, we need to meet their academic needs, we need to meet every single part of what they need before they can learn. But when we look at teachers, and teachers go through a lot too. I mean, teachers have trauma. Teachers have experiences where they need help. Teachers need to be told, "Hey, you can do this." That happens to me too. That happens to the best of us. Teachers need some, they need to learn some techniques to cope with such a stressful job. And I really don't feel like we focus on that much with teachers. We kind of give them all these things, and then we look at their academic, like how well are their students doing on academics? How well are they doing on their test? How can we get your students to get higher scores on things like that? But we seldom look at what kind of program or what kind of things we can do to support their emotional growth or their emotional capacity, and make sure that I don't feel like I want to bang my head against the wall at the end of the day. And if you do, you have somebody to talk it through with you, get you off the ledge.
Right. And man, when you compound that with taking on all the stories with which those kids come to class, and for the vast majority of teachers, they didn't have, I'm not saying it's true for all teachers, but for lots of teachers, they didn't have those kinds of stories when they were growing up. That's why they became a teacher, because school was fun and they had support and they participated and they did dance team and basketball and varsity soccer and all that stuff. But those kids that show up in a classroom, real life kids, aren't like that. And many times at a 21, 22, 23-year-old teacher, it's the first time they're hearing these traumatic stories. And to take that on, along with all the other frustration and these, you know what it is, man? It's like this constant daily feelings of failure that they've never felt before as a person. Because when you're in a class and you have 16 kids, I'm kidding, 32 kids, that kids aren't going to get it. They're different. You're trying to teach and you're trying to figure this thing out, and they're going to feel like a failure regularly. And that's just emotionally devastating for people, for teachers.
Yeah. And I experienced, I was a decent student, and that's why I went to be a teacher, like you said before. Yeah. Like a lot of people who go into teaching were pretty good at school, were rule followers, generally got good grades, generally liked teachers, they liked the school experience. There's some people, of course, that went into teaching with different backgrounds and through different avenues and different means and things like that. But it's one of those things where when we're looking at students and what they bring, we're expected to be a psychologist, a nurse, a doctor, a parent, a teacher. We're expected to play multiple hats with students, and we're just not prepared. So I think one of the things that we don't do in teacher preparation programs like we should is, how do we get biggest bang for our buck? Like, we have these separate programs. We have growth mindset over here. We have mindfulness over here. We have restorative practices over here. We have all of these different theories. We have academics over here, and we're supposed to be good at all of them. When the reality is, like, what do we do to combine all this theoretical stuff into how can we have a classroom where kids get supported and want to learn, and how can we be prepared to do that? Because when I'm thinking about that, it's just one of those things where we're not necessarily prepared to handle, like you said, the kids coming through the door that have had trauma. And, it's not like we have to do something completely different for the kids that have trauma, but something we should do is know, good teaching can involve using those strategies as talked about. You can infuse all of these good things into good teaching, so you're not having to do 87 different things. You're doing a few things really well that are really meeting the needs of your students.
I think you're right, man. Like, I really haven't thought about it like that, but when I think back of all like the world-class educators that I have seen, And like, that's the cool thing about my gig and yours too, man. Like when you're walking through the schools of a hallway, isn't it true?
Mhm.
Like, I know you feel the same thing. Everybody I talk to that, we're on the road and presenting and doing professional development, but you got to admit, like, you're walking down a hall and you look in some classroom and there's some world-class teacher killing it. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible compared to her, right? It's like, they're amazing. Well, when I really analyze them, like, they're not good at everything, but they're really, like you said, man, they're really, really good at a few things.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. And you can get better at a lot of things. And what are those things that give you your biggest bang for your buck? Like, do the students in your class, like when you're thinking about trauma-informed practices, do you have a little calming corner in your room? Do you have appropriate lighting? Do you have appropriately decorated rooms that are not too loud but not sterile?
Right.
Things like that. Are you actually teaching using diverse curriculum where the kids see themselves in the curriculum? Are you making people feel like welcome? Are you doing circles where restorative circles and things like that, where the kids feel like they all have a voice and they all feel a sense of belonging into these rooms? It's one of those things where there's some things we can do to really make more learning happen and be able to get to teach the curriculum. And we focus so much on the curriculum that we don't focus on setting the environments in which kids can learn.
Yeah, man, isn't it true that I hear this a lot where I don't have time for all that nonsense. I need to cover this. I got to cover that. I got 4 different preps. We have the test coming up. We all that. And like, what I always tell them is, look, it's like investing. You can invest a little bit up front all along, or you're going to pay dearly at some point in the end. I would rather invest a little time up front. And that's what I've always done in my classes. We take the first 4 or 5, maybe 4 minutes. I don't know. And that's what we do. We circle it up. We turn the desks around. We get on a circle. Everybody sits on the desk. We have a moment where we go around the room. We all get connected. We're all present. Everybody gets a moment to share. We clap it up and we sit down and we get after it. And it changes like those 4 minutes of investing in those kids in our classroom family. It changes everything.
Oh yeah. And it's one of those things where if we're teaching and they're not learning, it doesn't matter how many standards we cover. It doesn't matter how many pages in the book we get through. It doesn't matter what you're doing if you're teaching. It matters whether or not the kids are learning. So when we're looking at those things, it's an investment in time. But at the same time, if the kids feel like you care about them and they care about each other and the environment is conducive to learning, once you set the mood and the tone for the room and things like that, and we like to talk about time investment, like you mentioned too. There was recent research out that said you spend 144 minutes a week doing classroom management related items. 144 minutes a week. That turns out to be about 3 weeks per school year of time you're spending just redirecting students.
Yep.
3 weeks of your year. Imagine if we invested 3 weeks of our year into establishing those other things, into establishing, doing, because a lot of people do icebreakers and things like that in the first few days of school, and then we're done with that. We're moving on to the curriculum. The reality is you got to feed relationships. You got to actually keep them going. You have to repair them when they're broken. It's not just doing a cute icebreaker at the beginning of the year, and now we're ready to teach math, page 1 through 312.
Yep. I get it. And I've recommended, because I used to do it too. When I feel like we're too deep in it, and like I have put the sign on the door and the door is locked and it says, meet me in the cafeteria. And the kids show up in the classroom. Where is it? And they go down the cafeteria, and we're going to start class there, because we have to earn the right to go back into the classroom. We have to earn the right to start our family over. And that's the great thing about kids. Sometimes we feel like we can only do some new initiative or some new thing the first day of school. It can happen on any day. Yeah. And you can start over on any day too.
Yeah, kids are very resilient. You could have a terrible lesson. You could do something really stupid. You could have the most boring thing ever, and they're going to forgive you. And it's all going to be good very quickly with them.
Especially if you own it, right?
If you own it, and like you said, when you own it, sometimes you say, "Hey guys, that wasn't great yesterday. Sorry about that. I tried something new. It failed. Can you tell me how you felt about it? What can I do better?" We're so afraid sometimes when we think about taking feedback from kids and seeing what the kids think and what the kids value, and we're so afraid sometimes of doing this lesson and failing at it, falling flat on our face. The reality is we get to redo it again. We can do it again next year. We can do it better. We can do it next period with a different set of kids. we got to take some risks sometimes. It's just too simple and too easy to just stick to, page 90 through 100 is what we're doing today. Page 101 through 110 is what we're doing tomorrow. And I'm not going to take a risk and do something that the kids might really, really be invested in.
Hey man, what served as the impetus for you to leave the classroom and do that whole admin thing?
Oh, well, funny thing is that I actually I had no desire whatsoever to go into administration at all. I thought, man, I can't do that. When I was thinking about that, at the time when I was teaching, I was doing this thing called Genius Hour, which is pretty well known now.
Yeah.
But at the time, it wasn't very well known. I had, I was one of the first people to take the idea of Genius Hour, and which is student led, student choice, students actually choosing their own things they want to work on, and choosing what they're interested in, and doing a project about that. So I took that and put it into the science classroom, and we actually took what we, if a kid was learning about volcanoes, they picked which standard they wanted to focus on. They found a mentor who actually was somebody that worked with volcanoes, so they had to work with a mentor afar. I had kids working with NASA. I had kids working with WebMD. I had kids working with Berkeley physicists. I had kids working with chemists from really other companies. And this was a 7th grade classroom. And that's when learning really came alive for these kids. And kids actually were so vested that I had kids who never did anything the entire year, all of a sudden super into something for the first time. And I saw those light bulb moments come on for those kids. So when I got really big into that, it kind of caught on in the corporation. And I presented to the kids that did really cool projects for me, presented to the school board. And then all of a sudden I was presenting on it to other people in our corporation. All of a sudden I was presenting at the state, the state organization for science. And then all of a sudden I was doing a global conference about it. So I was like, wow, it'd be really cool if the things that I'm doing in my room could spread further. And I really like the idea of working with the school to help them develop more student-led initiatives and student-led learning and things like that. So my wife actually was the person that said, I think you can go and be an administrator. And I said, no way, there's no way I can do it. But, I reluctantly started my admin classes. And as I got more and more into it, I realized it was something I was really interested in doing and being a leader in the field of education and leading the school. And I actually went from being a middle school science teacher to a high school principal as my very first job.
Overnight.
I had never worked in a high school in my entire life. So not only was I going to a new high school with a new staff, but I never worked in a high school in my entire life either. And I hadn't been in a high school, I don't think, since I graduated high school.
Right. What was that? So that first time you're standing before the teachers, did you have a little bit of that imposter syndrome or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a little bit rough at first. They were like, who's that guy? What did he do? And why is he qualified to be in this spot? And I got that at first, and it was something where I had to overcome that. I taught middle school, which was secondary at least, but I had to be very vulnerable and say, tell me what works at this level. Like, what do you guys think? Like, what are some things that you think are going really well here? What are some things that you think we can work on? So I kind of gave them some voice, and I gave them some opportunities to help me out, and just was vulnerable. I didn't come in there the very first day and say, we're going to change this, we're going to change that, we're going to change this. Here's how we do it. I didn't want to come in with all these preconceived notions about how things should be done. So I think that put people at ease that this guy is not going to change everything immediately. He wants to hear what we have to say.
And at what point did you start thinking about the whole discipline thing? Because anytime you come up with a book and like, people think, well, he just started writing that one day, but it takes, for me anyway, like it takes years of this marination process where you have these thoughts, and it builds over time. What was the impetus to finally start putting the pen to the paper and get some of these thoughts out?
Well, I was when I was a high school principal, I started to see that I couldn't do what I did as a classroom teacher. So when I was a classroom teacher, I was in a great school district. I saw one fight in 9 years in the middle school, and one kid hit the other kid cried, and that was it. That was the whole ordeal. And I thought
that's also my fighting technique. I'll just start crying, and everything's over at that point.
Yeah, it worked pretty well because there's no further attacks.
Right.
It was pretty good. Um, so it was a very different environment when I went to become a high school principal, and I realized that they're not going to listen to me just because I'm the principal. I thought, man, I'm the principal, so people are going to automatically respect me. The kids are not going to talk back to me. They would never do that to someone that was the principal. And that was all fun and games until the second or third day of school when I got cussed out for the very first time.
Yeah.
And I realized I was coming at this kid in a way that was, I'm the authority figure. Like, hey, you need to get to class. What are you doing? And that girl was like, who are you? You don't know me. So then I realized very quickly that I couldn't just be the person in charge and have the authority and people would listen and things like that. I realized I have to build a relationship with these kids. I have to be authentic. I have to be real with them. And I have to, kind of hear what's going on and understand their background and understand the behavior before acting on it. So while I was there, developed a tool that was good at tracking behavior. So, and that's where the genesis of the app was. We were tracking behavior in students and seeing if what we did was successful. So we'd have an intervention with the student, and then they left the office. I don't know, I wouldn't see them for 4 weeks and not know if what we did was successful or not. So had this really fancy Google sheet where the teachers would input data on behaviors, and it worked out great. And but there was a huge lacking component of restorative practices at the time. So it was more punitive in nature. So it was more like you do this the third time, this happens. You do this the fifth time, this happens. So it was great for data tracking. It wasn't good for change in behavior necessarily. So, it wasn't teaching the kids skills that they needed to know or how to better do it next time, coping strategies, things like that. So it wasn't until I learned a lot about restorative practices and things like that, but it wasn't solidified until I went to Purdue Polytechnic and met my co-author, Nathan Maynard. And so while we were over there and I went to my new job, I went from high school principal to director of curriculum and learning of the Purdue Polytechnic High School Network. So when I was over there, showed him this cool spreadsheet that I had, and he was like, "Yeah, that looks good, but it's not overly restorative. It's not really something that is going to change the behaviors." So I had learned a lot about relationships and a lot about restorative practices and all those kinds of things. But it wasn't until I met him that I realized that we could actually turn this data tracking tool into something that actually changed behavior, not just recorded it. So he was very instrumental in helping form what is now Behavior Flip, which is our software, and it's the first and only restorative practice-based software.
Man, here's the thing. Let's give a quick shout out to your homie Maynard, because here's why. Like, this is where teachers, this is where the teacher meltdown begins, because it's what, and you've been there, you've been in the classroom, man. You spent 70 years in the middle school, and it's all that data, right? The tracking and the synthesizing, and now we're analyzing data and data. But what are we doing with this stuff? Like, and how is this going to help me? That's what people want to know, and it's frustrating to know when to put all those hours and effort. And so what I love about what you guys are doing is you're able to collect all this stuff and actually do something with it that makes a difference and changes the lives of kids and makes the teachers' lives better as well.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the data in our software is that we actually know if a kid had an intervention with this teacher and this teacher repaired the harm with this kid, I can actually phone up the science teacher and say, "Hey, I saw that Johnny threw something in your class. He did it in my class too. And I can actually read the documentation and see what you did with him to fix it. And I can say, hey, when you had him apologize to the class, did that actually change his behavior? Yeah, it was great." So basically, we're taking this silo that we work in education with kids, because if that kid's doing that in your class, he's likely doing it in another class, and another class, and another class. And I want to know, because there might be a teacher that really knows how to help this kid, and that kid is not having those problems in that class. So the data actually lets you know where things are working, where things are not working. Because with one kid, it really might do a great job to have just a one-on-one conversation with that kid, and that kid gets it, and we're good. Another kid, might really respond well to when calling the parents and bringing the parents in, or another kid might not care at all. So what we're doing is we're taking away, you do this, you get this punishment. You do this, you get that punishment. And we're making it more so the teachers have more autonomy to actually do what's best for the kid and changing that behavior. So we're not saying if a kid does this, this happens. We're like, okay, if a kid does this, the kid needs to fix it with you and the kid needs to make it right with you. And that's going to look different from teacher to teacher and from situation to situation. And we can actually see in the data, I actually did this intervention with a student, and you can see graphically that it altered that kid's behavior. And not only did they start doing things and not doing those behaviors again, they started repairing the harm of behaviors they've already done earlier. So they got it. Like, we know that that's working.
Yeah, man. It's also built, I think the effectiveness has to be built on the presupposition that there's a high quality, deep relationship in place with that educator and that kid. Because again, man, like if one kid, if a teacher says, hey, this is what's really effective in my work with this student, it's also what I have found 99% of the time is the reason it's really effective, because you have spent time effectively building a relationship with that kid as well.
Yeah. So no tool, we do software, and we're big in the technology and things like that, but no tool is ever going to replace a relationship with the student.
Yeah.
So what our tool does is it gives teachers the data. It gives them the ability to know what's working, what isn't working. It gives them guidance on how to help the student and things like that. But the reality is that some kids are going to act better in certain rooms than another because that teacher knows them, and because they don't want to let that teacher down, and they know, or they might just know that teacher has very set expectations, and here's exactly what they are. Here's exactly how you meet them. And I know what happens if I don't meet them. So they have what's called teacher clarity, which is one of the huge things in John Hattie's research. They know what's expected, and they know that teacher cares about them. So there's no app for a relationship. But what our app does is it helps teachers know when kids are in need, and it tells them that it's a great time to have this intervention with this kid to then help build that relationship. So it informs that, but it won't itself create a relationship.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? Like, that is the common denominator for, rigorous and high expectations for kid and the clarity. It's really been two things. It's the clarity, but it always comes back to that relationship. And you can have two completely polar opposite educators. Like my style, it's fun and games. It's a 3-ring circus in a classroom, and it seems like a chaos, but it's controlled. I know what I'm doing, and we're all going to include everybody. Or you can have the rows and columns, alphabetical order, and there's, sergeant somebody at the front of the classroom. But sometimes you come across one of those and they're so crazy effective because deep down inside, those kids know that this person loves me relentlessly. But you can see sergeant or colonel, whoever, down the hall, and it's complete chaos in there because those kids know they don't really care.
No, it's that balance. You got to have fun. You got to have some fun with kids. You got to let loose a little bit. You got to give, like, some people are so structured that they're afraid to let the kids even talk to each other. They're afraid to lose any kind of control. They're afraid to lose time, precious minutes, and things like that. So it's really that mix, like you're saying. It's like you gotta have a good background. You got to have good expectations. But the reality is, there's no one great way that you should be every time it's going to work for every teacher, because in your class, you might have a 3-ring circus, whereas in another class, they might have some opportunities where the kids are going to work together. There's going to be some individual work, and it's very structured. There's going to be 10 minutes of doing this, 15 minutes of doing that, 10 minutes of doing that, and that works great in that class. The reality is there's no one way to do things, but building relationships and caring about kids is something universal that everyone needs to strive to do. It just looks different in every room depending on your personality type. And a kid can really flourish in a couple of different learning environments, and that's just life. You're gonna have a boss that is really a certain way. You have to be able to work with that person, and you're gonna have a boss that's completely the opposite, and you're gonna have to be able to work with him too, or her too. So you got to make sure that you as a student are flexible and adaptable to multiple different ways of doing things. But what is disappointing sometimes is that we're doing sometimes as teachers what we're best at, and not really always what the students need and how they need to learn it in a certain way. So you got to be careful of that too. It's like you have your own style and your personality, but sometimes we need to do a few little tweaks in how we do things and try new things, and not be so set that I'm going to sit here and do the same thing no matter what every day, no matter if the kids are learning or not, and they're going to have to adapt to me. No, that's not how it works either. There has to be a mix.
That'd be so awesome if it did work that way, didn't it? Life would be easy. Hey man, tell me about some of these, for like schools that have you had like any success stories, like schools that really bought into the behavior flip and they use it, and that that because it's just like anything, man. Like a new initiative comes in or a new program, a new idea, and if the principal's kind of, well, let's dip our toe in, let's see if this thing works. I can tell you right now, it's not going to work. But have you had any schools that just went all in, bought in? Here we go, we're 100%, and really see some things turn around for them?
Yeah, we've had some pretty big success stories with our program, and it wasn't just alone the program changing things. It was people that adopted the philosophy of restorative practices with the program, because you can track data, but again, data tracking does no good unless you do something with it, right? It's great to know things, but how do you actually do it and make it usable? So there is a school in particular that comes to my mind first, Fulton, Missouri. Beth Hoff. She at Fulton Middle School, their school is just rock stars. I mean, they are rocking the system. They are drastically changing. They always had great data, but it is light years. It's just amazing to see how much they're using the system, and they're really embracing the positive recognition side of the system. So it's not just what do you do when kids do something wrong. It's how do I recognize the good things that are happening in the classroom. So we like to recognize what's called resiliency. So it's not just the simple things where the kids should do it anyway, like bring a pencil to class recognition, show up on time recognition, raise your hand recognition. So then we start to get into more of the carrots and sticks kind of thing where, we're starting to teach the kids that every time they do something that's already expected, we're going to give you recognition for it. That's not life. You're not going to get a pat on the back every 3 seconds. You do something, you get to work on time, you turn on your computer, you submit an email. That's just not how it works. What we're really focused on is what are those things that are above and beyond. Like we're looking at grit, we're looking at perseverance, we're looking at teamwork, we're looking at resourcefulness, we're looking at those life skills and those college and career readiness skills, and recognizing those instead of the things that you already should do as a matter of being a student in the first place.
Yeah. What I love about the whole thing is just like bringing it full circle, just like we talked about before, when people ask me what I think about this program, I say, hey, tell me, like, show me the educator and I'll tell you how well it's going to work. It's the same thing about a school-wide initiative. So show me the leadership at that school and show me how invested they are, and I can tell you how this thing's going to go.
Yeah, and it's working really well. We're in Lauderdale, Tennessee right now, and they're using it at the middle school, alternative school, and the high school, and we're talking to their other schools about using it as well. And it's really a point where I can actually track and know in real time. You can even track how many positive recognitions were given to subgroups, how many positive recognitions, like is there male versus female disproportionality or gender bias or things like that, not only in every single behavior that you measure, but also in positive recognitions. Are we even seeing certain students in certain groups? It is the question. Because we look at, all that disproportionality data at the end of the year, it's an autopsy. How many suspensions do we have? How many expulsions do we have? How many, in school, out of school, alternative placements do we have? This is a more proactive approach where we know at all times where we stand, and not just the hugest of behaviors, but the little things.
Yeah. Man, if now, I mean, you guys are so deep into this whole world. If you were to give some advice to an educator who, they're just at some school, they don't have behavior flip, they're just in their classroom fending for themselves. What, in terms of classroom leadership and managing that classroom culture, the family they create for their kids every day, what type of advice would you give them? Where would you tell them to start?
Well, of course, they would start with our book, right? I mean, that's a great starting point. I mean, I got to plug the book, Hacking School Discipline.
We got a book study coming up.
We got a book study coming up on that. But really, you got to focus on the proactive nature of things. We look so much at what do we do when kids do that, and what do we do when kids do that. The reality is, we create the environment that the kids are in, right? So there's no more important person in that room as far as the success of it than that classroom teacher. So when I'm looking at that, it's like, man, I gotta invest some of my time into relationship building all the time. So there's a chapter about circles that I highly recommend reading. Chapter 3, it's all about how do I make the kids feel welcome in my room? How do I get the kids to speak? How do I build investment into the classroom from my students? How do I give affirmations when students do things that are positive? So it's all about the proactive, like even greeting students at the front door. If you do nothing else, greet students as they come into your room. That increases engagement just right then and there. So just those little things. But the reality is that you got to have also teacher clarity. So students need to know what's expected in your room, how you're going to do it. They need to know what's going to happen if they don't do it. So when you think about those kinds of things, you got to think, okay, do the kids have some predictability? Do they know what's coming next? Do they know how to be successful in what's coming next? And how are they going to know at the end of the period whether or not I was successful? So it's all about being very clear with what you expect and not having the students have to guess what is expected in your room.
You know, oftentimes I go to universities and talk to student teachers. They bring me in and that sort of thing. And they always want like the magic pill. And man, like I wish there was a magic solution, but there's some art to this thing. There's some critical foundational steps that are really going to help, but but it takes time and experience and enthusiasm. And that a part of that is the art, but there's one non-negotiable, and that really is greeting kids at the door each and every day, coming and going, every single kid. Look, man, if it's good enough for Walmart, it's good enough for you. And like it really is that critical. You know, the eye contact, the physical contact, the handshake, the eye contact, the high five, the fist bump, whatever your style is, the appropriate greeting, all of that is absolutely critical.
Oh, it is. And something I want to add is a big no-no is sarcasm. Like I was so sarcastic early in my career, and sometimes you resort to sarcasm because you can't cuss or you can't say what's really on your mind. But it's something that's a very big downfall of kids. No one likes being made fun of, and it's not funny. Some kids might laugh, but it's not that kid. So that's one of the big no-nos I would tell a teacher starting out is you can't be sarcastic in a negative way towards your kid. Like, thank you so much for finally doing this, or, hey, look who came in the door finally, things like that.
Yeah.
Like those, imagine if you were at a staff meeting and your principal says things to you in that way. It's the same thing with kids. So it's all about those relationships. It's all about making the kids feel like you care about them and feel like they can talk to you and feel like they can take risk and make mistakes. And when you do something like that, it kind of diminishes that relationship and also the way that kid feels about you and potentially the school.
So true, man. God, this teaching thing is hard, isn't it?
It's so tough. There's no magic pill. There's a ton of art to it. The same strategies. We know what strategies work and what strategies don't work as far as the science behind it and the research behind it. But how to make it all flow, and how to it all sync and make sure that we're trauma informed and that we are mindful and that we're meeting their social and emotional needs. We're also pushing them, but not pushing them too hard, but not pushing them too little. And we're setting high standards, but then we're scaffolding to help them all get there. It's just a ton of things that need to go right, and then we're working on as educators. That's why I'm saying we need more synchronization. We need more synthesis of what works so that we're killing 2-3 birds with one stone. What strategies give our biggest bang for our buck and actually come together so that the teachers are not focusing on being a point guard, a power forward, or small forward in a center. They're worried about being a solid basketball player or a solid teacher that does a lot of things really well.
Yeah. Hey, man, here's a moment of truth. You ready? And don't you lie, because I'll catch you in a lie.
All right.
Here. So in your principal time, if and let's say your principal now, a teacher comes into the office and say, hey, Mr. W to the Einstein, I am overwhelmed, man. I'm emotionally spent. I'm tired. I'm going to cry. I need a day I need emotion. I need to just go home and sleep and come back refreshed. I got to take off tomorrow. What do you say?
That's tough. There's sub shortages.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of coverage issues. And
right.
As an admin, I gotta find someone. I gotta maybe cover that class tomorrow, things like that. So There's a whole lot of other variables and factors. But then the reality is that teachers need mental health days. Like teachers need to not be dying, not be, not sever their limb or something crazy. Right. The reality is a teacher that is not mentally prepared or not mentally in a good state can't help their kids and not the way that they should. So I think we shouldn't look so down upon teachers that really need time to reset themselves, time to center themselves, and time to really come back ready to go. So all the other variables make that very tough, unfortunately, in our profession. Because if I was working at a job, and I was working in an office and I wasn't there that day, then I had my 5 or 6 clients that I need to reschedule. And that's in that kind of thing. But then I can go and fix that. You can't replace that time with those kids, because you have 150 kids coming that day, whether you're there or not. So you can't have somebody come in and teach algebra 2 to your students with the same fidelity as you could probably. So we look at all those things, but the reality is teachers need to not feel bad that they need a break, and they also need to feel. And speaking of that, they need an administration who understands, and I can actually express and say, hey, things are not going well. I'm a little overwhelmed. What can I do? And the principal can be a resource or somebody to come talk to, not somebody that I have to feel ashamed about, or I have to worry about they'll think badly upon me, and all of these negative thoughts. I need somebody that actually believes that mental health is a priority in order for me to even be comfortable enough to come address that with my administrator.
Yeah. And what's sad also, and by the way, clearly what Brad Weinstein is saying is that he's happy to send an email to your principal to give you the day off. I think if I was going to sum it up, it'd be something like that.
Hey, take this recording and go play it in front of your admin.
Right. But you know what it is, man? It's like, I really hope we can somehow create a world, in smaller groups of teachers and circles for teachers, where we can prevent that from getting to that point of the tears and the meltdown and all that, where they can share and they can, oftentimes when teachers get in those circles, what happens, it turns into this downward spiral of toxicity and negativity. Well, you should have seen what James did in my class. You think he's bad. What about what, and that, rather than really doing something productive and positive and have some skills and an outline that we can cover that can get everybody effectively back on course. And if we had that in place, I think that would do wonders.
Oh, and people tend to fixate on those one kids and that one thing and that one parent email. And I would say, even on your worst day, it's 90% good for the most part, right? Like, you can't take one situation that happened or one negative parent email and really hold on to that. We don't tend to get emails when people are happy with us.
Never.
There's not, I get every once in a while, a parent sends a great email to me and things like that. But I would say a whole lot more people email when there's an issue. I don't email Walmart when I'm happy with Walmart per se. But if Walmart screws up something, then I'm very quick to come there to customer service and get it taken care of.
Right.
I feel the same way with teaching. You're doing so many things well. So many things are really great. So many of those kids really like what's going on in that class. We need to focus on that and let some things roll off our back sometimes when we can. And we need to seek productive ways to let out our frustrations and then move on past it. Don't get people to join in on, vent a little bit, and then let's do this and move on.
Man, have you seen any schools like that where they have those systems in place, where there are support circles for staff?
It's very rare that I've seen something like that. Because resources are so diminished. It's one of those things where if we had that kind of thing, we'd have to take it out of somewhere else, kind of thing like that.
I've got the answer.
Oh yeah?
Do you know who would do it? Who would love it? Who? Is a retired teacher.
Oh, that would be good.
They would love it.
Yeah, because we're thinking about teachers that have retired. Like I personally, I'm working with schools and things like that. But, it would be a great thing to actually go back into those schools and help mentor and help work with some of those teachers through those issues. But we don't, are we actually looking into that market? Are there people out there that are more than happy to come do it that we could tap into? That's a great question.
Yeah. I see them. I see them on campus regularly. There's an educator at one of my kids' school. I think she taught there for 45 or something years. She retired. She didn't retire. I don't know what she's still, she's still there. There was a big ceremony and they had a big party saying goodbye, and she showed up the next day and she, and here we go. I think, those kind of educators are everywhere. And I think putting them in a room, especially with new teachers with 21, 22, 23-year-old kids are launching into this profession, would be amazing.
Yeah. And it's just hard because, when we were teaching, when I was teaching even 10 years ago, things were a lot different. I think as time goes on, there's a whole lot more need for students. When we talk about social emotional needs and kids that have experienced trauma and things like that. So I think that's a great idea, but we need to be very well aware of the social emotional needs of today's kids in the classrooms and things like that. So if you're getting somebody to come work with the teachers, it needs to be someone that's more about, more than a math teacher who wants to teach math really well, things like that. You got to have that special combo of somebody that actually truly believes that we need to do the Maslow before Bloom kind of philosophy and things like that.
Yes.
So, it's something where good teachers, good teaching is good teaching, whether it's with, like we said, a technology tool, whether it's with a chalkboard, whether it's with the fancy things. But relationships are never going to go out of style, and they're never going to be something that we don't need and don't need to focus on, no matter what technology we have, and those kinds of things. So it's one of those things where you have to have them, or it's just not going to go well for you. I don't care how well you teach math. I don't care how much you know about history. If those kids don't like you and don't feel like you like them, it's not going to matter.
Isn't that true? Like years ago, like that was the saying. It was maybe even before you were in the profession, where I don't care if they like me, they're going to respect me. Like that whole thing. I guess they're still out there. I don't know, but you're right. This is a whole different world. This is a whole different generation, and it really does come down to that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we see, we saw instances where if a teacher talks to a kid in a certain way, the teacher will come to the admin office and say, that teacher does not like me. Yeah. And when that kid, and perception is reality, right? The reality is that if the kid feels that, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's how that kid feels, and it's how that kid's going to act in that class.
That's all that matters. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, man, I love what you guys are doing. And I know people are pumped for the book study coming up, and I think it opens tonight, where they can get in and register and qualify for, I think you guys are doing 10 free books, and then they're kicking off on February 6th. I know Todd Neslony's doing his stories from Web right now. That's going to wrap up, and you guys are up next, man. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. And with our book, we're really pumped about it, because it takes the things that we talked about with proactive strategies and like all those things I was talking about before, where you have all these separate initiatives, and it really infuses it into restorative practices are social emotional learning. They are building empathy. They are including mindfulness. They are including self-regulation strategies. They are growth mindset is a part of restorative practices. Yeah. So what we did in our book is we took all of the things that we believe are best for kids and the whole child, and we infuse them into what you can do with restorative practices, so that you're doing, like I said, you're doing some things that are encompassing a whole lot of the other things that kids need.
Yeah. Hey, man, before we shut it down, you want to give away some cash?
That sounds great to me. I'm not entered myself, but
in fact, it's me, you, and your co-author. We're the winners. $300. All right, let me tell you who won, man. We put this into the randomizer, and through the magic of the web, $100 gift card. Thanks to Craig Newmark Philanthropies. If number one first goes to Janice Porter. So Janice, if you message through the Help a Teacher Facebook page, they're going to hook you up. We have Janice Porter. We have Jennifer White. You also are a winner, and Heather Smiley. What a great name for a teacher, Heather Smiley. I love that. Mm-hmm. I'm glad it's not Heather Frowny Face or something. That'd be bad. Heather Smiley, Janice Porter, and Jennifer White. It's awesome. Listen, Brad W. to the Einstein, thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Thanks for being on. It was an honor.
I really appreciate you. And hey, for everybody else, one last announcement. Almost forgot. People were asking me about this. I have an event coming up. We have an event coming up in Corpus Christi. It is on February 12th. I want to say that's a Wednesday. It's a Teaching a Rockstar full day event. And we have, listen, man, we have teachers coming from all over, like all the way up from San Antonio, all the way to Laredo, then right there in Corpus Christi ISD, Beeville ISD, and Ingleside has a big group coming. So we still have seats available at the Teaching a Rockstar professional development event. All right, Brad, thanks so much, man. You guys are amazing. And you guys are in Tennessee today. And then where are you going next?
I don't even know. Yeah. Luckily, I have my co out there in the room with me. We're going to California and then New York.
There you go.
Yeah, so we're all over the place and loving it. But yeah.
That happens to me all the time. People say, "Hey, man, where are you going next?" I'm just staring at them, thinking, Aren't you going to the airport, right? Yeah, I'm going to the airport, but I'll figure it out when I get to the airport. That's when I'll know where I'm going next.
Always going somewhere.
Yeah. Hey, man, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Yep.
All right, have a good night, brother.
Have a good night.
All right, later.